This is a very exciting episode because we're going to learn that it's actually possible to earn a living from writing. Caroline Duggan is a best-selling ghostwriter for health and medical experts. She helps specialists turn their ideas into clear, credible books and content that people actually finish reading and then they recommend. She says she can go from idea to manuscript in as little as 2 months. That I want to hear about. I mean, I want to hear about everything, but Caroline has been featured on CBS, NBC, Fox 5, Good Day LA, and others. And now she is on the Write Like a Badass podcast. So welcome, Caroline.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Now, where are you located?
I'm located near Santa Barbara, California. So just kind of inland of Santa Barbara in this beautiful valley called the Santa Ynez Valley. It's a very beautiful place to live.
I have been there, gorgeous. I lived in LA though, and that not so beautiful all the time. I'm back in the Midwest now and can actually breathe the air, but
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my
okay.
husband grew up in Los Angeles and he always likes to say that he grew up in the 70s in LA when the rivers were on fire. So it's just
Yeah.
like LA, LA's cool. My sister lives there. I've got a lot of family there, but I'm happy where I'm at.
It's easy to take pot shots at LA, and I
It
actually
is.
enjoyed living there. I met many wonderful people. I had adventures, but eventually you kind of move around. At
Yep.
least
And
I
I
did.
started my career there as well. LA gave me the gift of being able to write for a living for sure.
Well, let's get into that. What is your origin story? How did you start ghostwriting?
Okay, so I came about it in the most roundabout way. I don't know how other people do it, but I had written a novel, and that novel was being considered by a well-known production company in Los Angeles. And so I was living in LA, and I was doing a lot of copywriting and marketing writing and just sort of brand writing for fashion and not in the medical space at all. I happened to have a friend who was working for a very famous doctor in Beverly Hills, and he mentioned to her that he was maybe thinking about hiring somebody to help him write a book. He'd started writing it and he wanted someone to help him. And she knew me very well. And she said, well, I know one writer really well who's written a book because she knew a lot of screenwriters and things like that, but no, you know, book writers. It's a totally different thing. So she called me and she said, I've got this doctor. He's thinking about writing a book. Would you be interested in helping him with that? And I was like, I don't know anything about that, but sure, I'll meet with him. I came in, she set up a meeting. I came in to meet with him. He gave me this book that he had been working on. He was in between patients. He's a very busy guy. He said, why don't you read this and let me know what you think? And I, having no filter, read this book. He came back in. He said, what do you think? I said, well, this is garbage. And he was like, he was sort of taken aback. This is a very sort of powerful guy. He's got a lot of people around him working for him. And I think that something about that sort of broke the ice between us. And he was like, well, what would you do? And I said, well, you've written this as if it's for people who can understand heavy scientific language. And if you're writing this for the public, which is what you've told me is your purpose, no one's going to be able to read this. I can't understand what you're talking about. And so he basically hired me on the spot to do this for him. And I spent the next several months, he gave me a hard deadline. It was an intense deadline. And I got into this. And honestly, that was such a gift because I learned how to work fast. I learned how to figure out a methodology quickly. I needed to get this done. And I was like, everything was writing on it. And so that is how I got into it. And that's how my career in ghostwriting in the medical space began.
Do you have a background in medicine or science, education in those areas?
No, and you know what? This is the question I get the most. And this is what I'm going to say about that. I do not. And in my experience, experts, if experts could write for the public about their subject in a clear way that was compelling and interesting to read, they would do it. They can't because they're too in the weeds. They know too much. It's too clear to them because they've spent, all of their schooling years and all of their careers most of the time gathering all of this information, nomenclature, technical terms, all of this stuff that makes it very, very hard to clearly communicate a compelling story, their story. And so what happens is all of that education and amazing expertise gets in the way of a clear, concise, interesting, compelling story, and they're not able to tell it. They need somebody who's completely outside of their field of expertise to look at it, get this amazing amount of information for them, and then say, this is the story. This is how to communicate this clearly so that I can understand it. I know how to ask the questions that a reader would ask. Well, what does that mean? Well, how would that work? Well, whoa, whoa, whoa. What do you mean by that? How does this happen to this and then this occur? I don't understand that. And then they have to think about it and go like, well, and then they have to break it down. And then all of a sudden you're able to communicate. I'm able to communicate to a regular reader. Oh, I get it. Oh, wow. I've never been able to understand that before. So many of the reviews on the books that I've worked on say exactly that. This was such a clear writing style. I could understand this very complicated subject. That is the point, I think, of writing any book at all, is to be able to give the reader something they didn't already have. And a lot of times experts, it's just they know too much. They can't do it for themselves.
So is this a full-time career for you?
Yes, it is.
Then
Um,
how did you go into that from that very first assignment that you got?
so that first one led to a second book really quickly, which was awesome. I got a referral from that. I mean, I was able to meet that deadline. The book hit #1 on Amazon. Um,
Wow.
really quickly, a lot because of him. He got a lot of press. And then I got a referral right away for a second book. And so I started right away. I mean, it was literally weeks between projects for me. And then after that second one, I was kind of like, okay, what do I do now? And I was doing some more copywriting. Again, I had a background in copywriting. I was doing some more copywriting. And about a year later, I was approached to do a third book. And it kind of just started. Every time I would think, I know so many writers probably feel this way. Every time I would finish a book, I would think, well, that's it. That's got to be it. There's never going to be another one. There's no way anyone is going to ever come to me again with another project. And it just continues to happen. Word of mouth is an incredibly powerful tool for a writer, especially if you want to be a ghostwriter, doing a good job, being able to provide a service for people. You become so close to these people. You really do. I feel so connected and close to my clients. I'm asking them deeply personal questions and I need them to give me honest answers. So we have to become buddies. And when you have that kind of relationship with someone, you create a bond and they want to take care of you. I still talk to the doctors that I've worked with. We still check in with each other. I'm still like, I know what's happening in their lives, a lot of times. So I think and then there's also, they all kind of know each other too. Doctors all know each other. I feel like it's a small community. Um, yeah. So I've just been able to sort of ride the wave of doing good work, which I mean, honestly, if that is your #1 calling card, it will help you do good work.
It sounds like you don't have to put much time and effort into marketing your services.
I do anyway. I spend a lot of time working on social media presence, making sure that people know how to do this too. I'm not a gatekeeper. I really believe in providing other writers with insights. I've created workbooks for other writers that I have available on social media, and they get lots of downloads. I work really hard to try and make sure that people know how this works, that they feel like it's something they can do. I mean, writers, I feel like working writers, they need lots of ways of making money in this world, because it's just, I think writing has greatly been devalued over the last few decades. Everyone thinks, oh, well, I can write, or I can have AI write, or I can, I can have my cousin write it for me. And we don't have the same kind of amazing reverence that we used to have for storytelling. I've seen that slip. And so I really encourage writers, and I like to encourage writers. And I do spend a lot of time marketing that way.
You know, you mentioned AI. It pains me to say that I have a good friend who advised her brother who needs money, oh, just use AI to write some children's books and put them on Amazon and you'll make a lot of money. The
Yeah.
mindset behind that just is upsetting to me. But I have to ask, could AI do what you do?
Well, you know what? I can tell you pretty much unequivocally no. And the reason that I feel really strongly about this, is because I have had a a very relevant story from just a few months ago. Um, Someone approached me about writing a book for them, but this was very different than it's been in the past. They said, "I've been working on a manuscript for a year with AI. I have used AI to create this whole manuscript. All I need you to do is edit it so that it sounds human." And I was like, you know what? Curiosity, I cannot help myself. I'm like, yeah, send it over to me. I'm dying to know, because this is the question that's coming up for everyone right now, right? Is AI going to replace me? Is AI going to take my jobs? Can AI do what I do? So I had to know for myself, because I'm also a deeply curious person. And I want to know the real reasons for things. And I try to stay really level-headed about stuff. So I got this manuscript and I went into it. I tried to go into it so open-minded. I tried to go in with my hands fully open and just ready to receive whatever this book was going to give me. I really wanted to just be clear-eyed. I didn't want to have a bias. Um, and it was the worst thing I've ever read. It was so bad.
Oh,
And now, listen, was it, did it have a lot of information in it that was interesting information? Yes, it did. But I will tell you, when I took on that project, I will never do a project like that again. It took me longer to write that book, to rewrite that book, than it would have taken me to write that book from scratch. It took so long to undo what AI had done and how AI had created this um, burdensome story that was going in circles and had no human touch to it at all. I mean, that's not surprising, but it was trying too hard to sound human, and it didn't sound human, and it didn't feel correct, and it was heavy, it had no brevity, it had no lightness, it had no alacrity. There was no alacrity at all. It took me weeks to read this book. I was just reading it. It was so painful. And I told him straight up, I said, listen, I'm gonna have to really rework this from the ground up, because no one is going to be able to get through this book. It is so dense, um, and so boring, and it doesn't it I can't it's you're going to have a really hard time keeping people from page 1 to 10. You're going to lose everyone. And to his credit, he was like, okay. I ended up doing that. And it took me 2 months to do that work, even though all of the work was already there. And it shouldn't have taken me that long. It did, because it was just so difficult to work backwards.
You have to do a lot of fact checking because I think a lot of people are unaware AI sweeps in a lot of information from the internet, and a lot of the information on the internet is wrong. It
Yeah.
takes it all in.
It does. And yes, I did. I had to check and recheck things. I had to undo sentences. I had to interview him just like I have to do with, it wasn't like I got this book and was able to just craft a story. I had to spend hours on the phone with him, you know, getting the humanity back into the story. And it wasn't even accurate. So, yeah, I think will there be a day when AI can do what I do? Who knows? That's so impossible for me to predict. But is that happening right now? No way. I can tell you with a big old capital letter N-O, no, because I just read a book written by a brilliant man. I mean, this guy is so smart. He knows his subject cold. And it was devastatingly boring. So no, definitely
No,
not.
I'm glad to hear that. Now, let's say you do get an actual client, not an AI generated book. What is your process? It looks like on your website you've listed 5 steps from the start to finish.
Yeah, there are 5 steps. They're really clear. I think when I've done it without the 5 steps before and just kind of gone in Wild West style, and it doesn't come out as good. So I have just found that this is a really great method, and it's more for me than the client, really, to kind of move myself through the process really cleanly. So the first thing I do is sort of the most loose-ended part of the process, which is I get to do what I call the download. So I spend a lot of time on the phone or in person if I'm lucky enough to be in person with a client. I spend a lot of time on the phone. I record every meeting, and I am just getting the download of what they believe the story is. And what I find in that process is normally the person is just one step off of what the story is. They think the story is, oh, I came up with this amazing protocol to reverse this health problem or whatever. Let's just say that's the story. Um, but when I'm talking to them, what I'm finding is that's not really the story. The story is that someone really close to you died, or you almost died, or you had all of these clients coming to you with this one problem and you couldn't figure it out. And you were like staying up until 2 a.m., like reading art, trying to figure out this problem. And then something changed for you and you were able to reverse. That's the story. And that is what I'm trying to do in step one. I'm trying to find the real story. What is the motivation behind this book? What's the reason that we're writing this book, the real reason? And what is the reason that a reader is going to stay with you? Because that story needs to be throughout the book. That reason to believe the story has to be there from page one, and it's going to carry you all the way through. So that's the first thing I'm doing. I'm getting a download of information. I am listening to the way they tell their story. I'm listening to the emotions I'm behind the story, and I'm starting to really digest all of that and find that core. And then once I've kind of identified that and I feel like I'm really in the story with them, then I move on to step two, which is like a blueprint, or an outline. You could call it an outline. I call it a blueprint because that just feels more, for me, I like to think of things visually, especially when I'm doing ghostwriting, because I use so many visual metaphors to explain complicated concepts for people. So for me, a blueprint just feels a little bit more visual for me than an outline. What's an outline? I know what a blueprint is. You get the blue paper and the dotted lines. Anyway, so I'm shaping the story. Okay. In every chapter, I'm looking for what is the feeling I want the reader to come away with at the end of that chapter? Are they feeling at the end of that chapter, do they feel curious? Are they feeling freaked out? Are they feeling, afraid for themselves? Are they feeling excited by the information? What's the feeling? What question am I trying to solve? And what question am I asking to move me into that next chapter? And I'm sort of shaping chapter by chapter. Okay, this is how we're going to plot out this story. I then go to the client. I say, this is sort of the shape of the book. Once they're like, okay, great. I don't usually get a lot of pushback in that phase of things. And then I go into the draft. I start crafting. I start taking each one of those sections. I don't always do it in order. I usually do, but sometimes I don't. Sometimes I do chapter one, then I go all the way to the last chapter. And then I kind of fill in the middle. It depends. But I start drafting, and this portion also requires some phone conversations. I will hit walls. I will get to a scientific technical part of the book and go like, wait, I'm lost. If I'm lost, the reader's going to be lost. So I do a lot of clarifying calls. Okay, what does this mean? Can you explain this to me? Can you explain how does a cell do X, Y, and Z? Or what's the difference between, explain epigenetics to me, like I'm an idiot, and I get in deep on some of these subjects, and I start finding those metaphors that I talked about. What could explain, what metaphor could I use here to give somebody a visual and a deeper understanding? And then once that draft is done, I then wait for feedback. I turn in that draft, and this can be honestly the longest part of the process. This is what makes me question mark, how long is this book going to take to write, is the feedback section, especially with experts because they are busy. So maybe they will take a week to get back to me. Maybe they'll take 2 weeks to get back to me. Maybe I won't hear from them for a month. It depends. And maybe they'll give me back tons of notes or 3 notes. It depends. So that part happens. And then after that, it does become like step 5 is a little bit open-ended. Some people want to self-publish. Some people want to traditional publish. Some people have a graphic artist that they use all the time. So they have like the cover art, they're already working on it. I can work within all of those scenarios. So I can take it all the way to self-publish and actually submit it to Amazon for you, or I can help you craft pitch materials and help you find a traditional agent, or I can just hand over the manuscript and you can do whatever you want with it after that. So it just depends.
I was going to ask you if you help them with query letters and do you do research on whatever literary agents might accept their,
Yeah,
wow, a full
I
range
can.
of services.
I know. One-stop shop over here. And honestly, I have the amazing benefit of having a my formatter is my husband. So
Okay.
yeah, he's a really good graphics guy, and he worked in print for a long time. So he like does all if I have a client who wants me to take it all the way to the end, I'm just across the house from my formatter yelling at him. No, I don't like that font. But anyway, yeah. So I can do it all the way soup to nuts, or however somebody wants
Whatever
to
they
do it.
want. Do you ever get any pushback from these very busy experts who say, hey, I didn't expect all these phone conversations. I thought I could just hand this over to you and you would do everything.
I think this is where charm comes into play. I have not yet had that happen to me. But I also definitely majorly respect pre-COVID, I used to do a lot of this work in person, right? So I would be there in their office and talking to them between patients. So I got really used to and I got a deep understanding for what their schedules are like and how demanding they are. So I have learned how to um, ask for time in a respectful way and be flexible myself. So I will literally drop everything. If my client can talk for 20 minutes, I will drop what I'm doing and I will make time for that. I am available and I make myself available to my clients because I know they're busy. I also really try and make conversations engaging and fun. I try and make the process fun. It is fun. Writing a book is enjoyable. It should be for them. It is for me. And I really try and make sure that they're always having a good time. Um, and uh, and when I do ask tough questions, um, I try and make it something that feels good for them, like a safe space for them. But most of the time, I do find that experts and doctors, they love to talk and they love to explain things to people. They love it. So if you are a hungry, curious person, they will talk to you until the cows come home. They enjoy it.
It's their passion, really.
It is.
Now, you seem like a very positive person, but has there ever been a client that you regretted taking on because they were difficult? Or a book that you were like, oh, I wish I hadn't signed on for this?
I mean, other than that AI one, I think the robot is my least favorite client. That robot was my least favorite client for sure. Everyone else I've worked with has always been pretty amazing. Even if you are dealing with a certain amount of hubris or you're dealing with a certain amount of ego or whatever, I find I feel really lucky most of the time that I get to talk to these very brilliant people. I learn so much about I've learned so much about science, about research, about health, about wellness, longevity, cancer. I have learned so much about these subjects that are so complicated, and from people who really know. I mean, when we live in a world of misinformation. To be able to pick up a phone and talk to the head of microbiology for at USC and have like a deep conversation about you know, microbes is like, especially during COVID, I was like calling him like, what does this mean? And he would be like, oh, and explaining it to me. And I was the calmest person of all my friends. And then I just am lucky. They're amazing people. So I feel good about that most of the time.
To the extent that you're comfortable, could you talk about what you charge or what you make on books?
Yeah, so it depends, right? I mean, it depends on the scope. So sometimes somebody has a pretty straightforward, easy thing to write about. It's not going to take me very long. It's going to be pretty easy. They have a lot of notes. They have a lot of information already available to use. And then it can be $20,000. Sometimes it's a big project. I mean, there's a project that I'm still in talks on that would take me, and I was really honest about them, like that will take me a year and I will have to put everything else aside. This is a memoir because I have done literary writing as well. I'm like, that's going to take me a year. That's $100,000 project. That is not an easy project. That is something that I will have to put everything aside and just focus on this. So it is a big range, and a lot of that range and knowing that range comes from experience. But sometimes I make mistakes. Like I quoted that AI manuscript at 20 grand, and I wish I'd charged twice that because it took twice as much work as I thought it was going to. So, sometimes you mess up and you kind of have to just eat it.
You've kind of centered on medicine and health and science. Would you write books outside of those subject areas?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of my favorite subjects to write on is sciences. I know that feels similar, but it can be really different. Like I wrote a whole book on future sciences, like nanotechnology and robots, but not AI robots. I mean, we're talking about medical robots and stuff. That was so cool. I have, and I'm writing a novel about a science fiction novel, and that really helped me with my ideas because my book all centers around quantum physics. And I got all these cool ideas from these like quantum physicists that I was talking to, and I was just like, whoa. So I don't know.
You're getting
I
free
write about
research. Woo!
yeah, free research. Thanks, guys. But yeah, I've written documentaries about I wrote a really amazing documentary about the Jonestown Massacre. I've written I'll write anything, honestly. I just like writing, so I'll write anything.
I'm glad you mentioned your novel because I wanted to get back to that.
Hmm.
You had written a novel earlier. What happened to that?
It got shelved. Nothing happened with it. But hey, you know what? I always say it was my first book that I ever wrote. I was 25 years old and somebody liked it enough to buy it and it got shelved and never made. But you know what? I don't even care because somebody read it and said this is good. And that was enough for me.
I feel you. I've had self-published novels that have sold 5 copies.
Yeah. I mean, that'll happen to you.
But I
So,
learned. I learned from doing them. They very much made my ability to write plots and develop characters and use research much better. So
yeah.
I don't regret all the time I put into that. But it would be nice to have my novel I just finished go a little further than that. Now, how do you balance though your creative writing with your ghostwriting? Because that's a lot of writing.
Yeah, it is, and it's hard. There are definitely times where I have to put my own creative writing aside. But just to your point, I mean, writing is writing. And when you're writing, you're learning about writing as you go. There is no better way to learn how to write than to write. And so I feel that that first novel that I wrote, that first book I wrote, what I know now, having written so many books, ghost written so many books, is so different than what I knew then. And I had studied and I had tried to understand how to do it, but I just have done it now. I've done it. I've taken books from the bottom all the way to the top. I've gone all the way through. I've found my own method. I know the questions to ask myself as I'm going through. And that has really helped me to be a much more succinct writer, a much more consistent writer, a much more creative writer. Yeah, I think I'm a better writer today than I was, and I think that that's just experience. So even though it does, that balance can be tough, because sometimes I do get like after I'm just finished a project, I've been working on a book for months. I wrap it up. I'm like, I get back to my own book and I'm like, I don't want to write any more words.
Yeah.
No more words, please. I also feel like a lot of times it invigorates me. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I'm like, I get a thought that I wouldn't have thought had otherwise. And I get motivated to just kind of tell the story differently, you know?
That's
It does help.
exciting.
Yeah.
You may have inspired someone who's listening to this podcast episode. So, what if someone wants to take a crack at ghostwriting? What advice would you have for them?
My advice would be to write anything you can. You know, write blogs, write copy. I've written so much copy. Oh my gosh, you can learn so much from writing copy. Copy is incredible, and there are always people hiring copywriters. Still, even though AI is sort of trying to take over, there are
AI is
still
out there. Can you define copy?
yeah, so any kind of written material for advertising, marketing, branding, anything like that. If you're writing about something and it's descriptive and it's literal, that can be seen as copywriting. So you're like, okay, I'm going to write copy for this, you know, for Advil. I don't know, I'm just making it up. I'm going to write copy for Advil, and you're writing even the instructions on the back of the bottle or whatever. That's copy. And you're learning how to write very succinctly with copywriting. It's the you want to find the best, fastest, clearest way to say something. And I have gotten so much better at my creative writing through copywriting. So write anything you can. Anything, write.
That is so interesting that you say your non-creative writing has added to your creative writing. My background is journalism, and I've always felt that I had to sort of fight against it, even though it certainly has helped me be a writer, but very much who, what, when, where, why, instead of, breaking my imagination open and using words and phrases in a more creative way.
I
Eh,
mean, I hear that. I mean, I do hear that because one my biggest struggle against my copywriting instincts has been it has been the brevity, right? So I because I've learned to say things so succinctly, when I go to write descriptions and stuff, I find I am like, okay, and what's the point? I'm like, you know, so I've had to learn how to, but I think though, because I've had to learn to do that and because I've had to learn to say things quickly, um, then when I'm adding back in, I'm able to add back in stuff that matters. So I'm writing the stuff. What I tend to do when I'm doing my creative writing now is I write it all, like I write what needs to be said, and then I have to go back in and add color. So I find that as long as I know that that's the process I need to go through and I address it that way, what I end up with is a really interesting, I think is a really interesting balance of like being able to say things succinctly, say things like have some syncopation, I guess. And then also have add in those layers and that depth that needs to be there. You know, I've gotten really lucky recently to get to work with a very famous literary editor named Tom Jinks, who founded Narrative Magazine, and he's worked with like James Baldwin and so many amazing writers over his career. And one of the things that he said about my writing when he was first agreeing to work with me is he said, is he did say your alacrity is one of the best I've read, because he said you just know how to move me from point A to Z. You know how to get me there. And some writers don't. They go off on all these tangents and they kind of are pushing and pulling, and where I don't really can't really follow. And so I think that, and you would probably have a similar feedback having coming from journalism. You know how to get the reader where they need to go, you
And I
know?
don't bury the lead.
No,
Lead.
yeah, exactly.
There is
Exactly.
nothing that turns me off more as a reader than to get involved with a book and it's rambling and it's unfocused and all over the place. I want to know what's going on. I want to be drawn in, not pushed out with confusion, by
Exactly.
confusion. Yeah.